Leaves provide trees with all their food. They are the kitchens in a plant. Photosynthesis is the process by which green leaves prepare food. This process requires sunlight. Sunlight shines through the top of the leaf and reaches the underlying layer of cells. The green pigment chlorophyll in the chloroplast traps the light energy. In the chloroplast, a process that uses water changes the light energy into a kind of chemical energy called ATP. This chemical energy is stored in the chloroplast. The chloroplasts use the chemical energy to make food. Air enters the leaf through the stomata and moves into tiny spaces around the food-making cells in the leaf. Carbon dioxide from the air passes through the cell walls and membranes of the cells. Carbon dioxide enters the chloroplast where the previously stored chemical energy converts the carbon dioxide into sugar. As a byproduct of this process, oxygen is released into the air.
When life took hold on the planet around 4 billion years ago, there was a vast network of hydrothermal vents, perhaps providing the geochemical energy to spawn and support life. There is now evidence that the surface of this early Earth was bombarded by meteors and asteroids. The safest harbor for life may have been in the deep. A deep-sea mountain range over 46,000 miles long, known as the Mid-Ocean Ridge System. It stretches around the planet like the seams on a baseball and marks where the great plates of the Earth's crust are spreading apart. All along this vast network, volcanic eruptions give birth to new ocean floor. And molten rock deep under the seabed creates the scalding black smokers that stream from vents and chimneys. The birth of a chimney starts when molten rock far below the seabed heats up water circulating through the cracks. The hot water rises, carrying dissolved metals such as iron, copper, and zinc from deep within the crust. When this hot acidic fluid hits near freezing seawater, the metals come out of solution to form the rocky walls of the chimney. The geology and chemistry of the vents have changed little. Some of these chimneys tower as high as 15-story buildings. And though sunlight never reaches them, they are blanketed with life.
It's part of this mystery about this environment is that you go through the really dark water where you don't expect to find much. And then suddenly you start seeing life, and it's life that's very beautiful because it is very bright and luminescent, and also very striking because it doesn't look like anything that we're used to.
These worms harbor inside their bodies a remarkable source of food: tiny, single-celled bacteria. These microbes are able to produce food using hydrogen sulfide and other chemicals that flow around the chimneys. Each microbe is invisible to the naked eye, but when billions clump together, they appear like cottony webs draping the sea floor. As plants at the surface use the energy of sunlight, these microbes use energy stored in chemicals to grow and multiply. The larger creatures in this world either live off microbes within their bodies or prey on one another. Giant spider crabs, snails and sea stars, the fish and the octopus, all are ultimately dependent on tiny, single-celled organisms and the volcanic fluids that flow from the rocks. This is a world where the energy for life springs not from the sun, but from the geothermal forces of the Earth itself.
As a biologist, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the geology is the driver for the biology. And in fact, even the structure of the rocks that are in the chimneys are going to determine the type of fauna you find on top of the chimneys.
And by delving inside a chimney, they may find clues to how life itself originated.
Lesson 3. Flow of materials in an ecosystem. Respiration. By which carbon dioxide and water are released by living things to the environment. Decomposition. By which materials from bodies of dead organisms are returned by decomposers to the environment. Lesson 4. Interaction of population in an ecosystem. Ecological niches. Food chain. Food web. Symbiotic relationships. From the word symbiosis, Greek symbion, to live together, the term for the interdependence of different species which are sometimes called symbiont. Mutualism, symbiosis that results in mutual benefit to the interdependent organisms. Commensalism is an association between two different kinds of non-parasitic animals called commensals that is harmless to both and in which one of the organism benefits. Parasitism, also known as antagonistic symbiosis. One organism receives no benefits and is often endured while supplying nutrients or shelter for the other organism. Predation is the capture and consumption of organisms by other organisms to sustain life. Module 3. Materials and Nutrient Cycles.
Water is the fundamental ingredient for life on Earth. Looking at our Earth from space, with its vast and deep ocean, it appears as though there is an abundance of water for our use. However, only a small portion of Earth's water is accessible for our needs. How much fresh water exists and where it is stored affects us all. Nearly 2/3 of this fresh water is stored in the polar ice caps, snowpacks, and glaciers, making it inaccessible for long periods of time. The water cycle is dynamic. It describes the continuous movement of water on, above, and below the surface of the Earth, and the transitions from one state to another. Sea surface temperature, surface winds, and air temperature influence the rate of evaporation at the ocean surface. In the tropics, warm ocean surface temperatures support high rates of evaporation. Wind also increases evaporation. When the air's temperature is warmer, it can hold more water. While the atmosphere does not store a large quantity of water compared to the ocean, rivers, and lakes, it can transport water quickly from one place to another. Low-lying regions of the atmosphere with high moisture and strong winds can form atmospheric rivers to transport water horizontally. Clouds are formed as water vapor cools and condenses into droplets and ice crystals. Clouds and water vapor act as insulators in the atmosphere. Clouds help shield the Earth from the sun and trap heat from below. When cloud particles grow large enough, they may fall out as rain or snow. Under the right conditions, areas of precipitation can grow into large storms. As storms grow, they transfer heat vertically into the upper atmosphere. The migration of storms helps to distribute heat between the equator and poles, shaping wind patterns globally. How storms grow and intensify depends on atmospheric moisture, surface temperatures, and wind patterns. Precipitation is concentrated in some parts of the world and scarce in others. It can vary substantially from season to season and from year to year. Water that falls on the land surface as precipitation is stored within snowpacks, lakes, reservoirs, soils, and underground aquifers. Water availability varies from place to place and over time. The availability of water affects the type and abundance of vegetation, the primary source of food for animals and people. Extreme water cycle variability, unusually dry or wet conditions, impacts humans worldwide. Each year, hazards such as floods exact a costly economic and human toll. Most of the water that falls onto land remains stored there for weeks or more. Snowfall is stored as snowpack or ice. Meltwater and rainfall are stored in lakes and soils. Some of the water is absorbed by plant roots or drains into the water table. Eventually, the water will evaporate to the atmosphere or return to the ocean and streams and rivers, providing a source of nutrient-rich water that supports ocean life. Sensors on a suite of NASA satellites observe and measure water on land, in the ocean, and in the atmosphere. These measurements are important to understanding the availability and distribution of Earth's water, which is both vital to life and vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and a growing world population.